We have to what?
We have two rectangle on the screen now.
We have to return to the ayat, you mean?
I mean two rectangle, the box, the two boxes, the
Oh,
two
don't worry.
boxes.
The boxes, the boxes.
Yeah, the boxes, yes, I mean.
Yes,
Yep.
yes. Get those boxes away.
Yeah.
The boxes are gone now? Are they gone?
Almost.
Almost?
Yes, they are gone, mashallah.
SubhanAllah.
Jazakallah.
The
See?
mysterious boxes. The AI didn't help yet, huh?
All right, let's do it. إذ قال الله يا عيسى ابن مريم اذكر نعمتي عليك وعلى والدتك إذ أيدتك بروحي. Now I want you to look at this one, أيدتك, because the dal and the ta come from the same place of articulation. So that's why you don't say the dal and you blend it with a ta. بروح القدس تكلم الناس في المهد وكهلا. I was asking my husband, I said, which one of these was not mentioned in the New Testament? And he told me تكلم الناس في المهد was not mentioned in the New Testament, that he was speaking during infancy. وكهلا وإذ علمتك الكتاب والحكمة والتوراة.
Yeah, that wasn't mentioned.
Yeah. والإنجيل وإذ تخلق من الطين كهيئة الطير بإذني فتنفخ فيها فتكون طيرا بإذني وتبرئ الأكمه والأبرص بإذني وإذ تخرج الموتى بإذني وإذ كففت بني إسرائيل عنك إذ جئتهم بالبينات فقال الذين كفروا منهم إن هذا إلا سحر مبين. Okay, so what is the story here? To make it the story, to make it into the interpretation. إذ قال الله, and of course we talked about يوم and إذ. They pretty much come with the same idea. It's basically to remind you, it's basically speaking about an event, whether it's talking about an event or whether it's talking about a day or whether it's asking you to remember a circumstance that is an event, or remember something that happened. إذ قال الله, when the Lord Almighty had said, Ya Isa ibn Maryam, O Isa, Isa, is it Isa or is it Isa ibn Maryam, or is it Isa is the name Arabi? The name is not an Arabi name, but it was Arabized. Ibn Maryam, Maryam is also not an Arabi name. أذكر نعمتي عليك وعلى والدتك. Remember, so أذكر, is it remember? Is it to mention the blessings upon you and upon your mother? إذ أيدتك, this is the إذ right there, إذ, and this إذ is a little slightly different than this إذ, because this إذ would be speaking about to remember, and this one is also to remember, but it's slightly different because this is giving the explanation to what was mentioned here. Okay, so here نعمتي عليك وعلى والدتك, and here then you would get a semicolon, and this would be, well, what is the blessing? Semicolon, and here's what the blessings are. إذ أيدتك بروح القدس. When you say أيدتك, that would actually mean to give, yes, it comes from the root yad, which means hand. Okay, and then the tuka, أيد, yad is to give a hand, and أيدتك is basically I had given you the hand. So that would be the pronoun. But this isn't to give a hand, literally giving a hand. This is a figurative word to actually mean had given you support or power. بروح القدس. روح القدس is جبريل عليه السلام. تكلم الناس في المهد وكهلا. تكلم الناس في المهد, that you would talk and converse to the people and converse, of course, with the people during al-mahd. Al-mahd itself is basically the bassinet, or in childhood and infancy, whether al-mahd is the place where a child is set in, an infant is set in, or whether al-mahd is basically the timing, in other words, in infancy. So تكلم الناس في المهدي, whether we're speaking about a place that he was setting in, or whether this is talking about the timing, which basically would be during his infancy. وكهلا. الكهل is going to be a person between the ages of 33 and up. That would be الكهل, which is the older person. So in other words, this is speaking about there was a time when he was young, he was already given the miracle to speak during infancy, and then when he comes back, and that's the kahla, when he comes back later, of course, that would be part of the signs of Judgment Day. He would come with the same message, which is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِذْ عَلَّمْتُكَ. وَإِذْ عَلَّمْتُكَ. Now this would be giving that addition. When I had taught you al-kitab wal-hikmah, I was capable of learning how to read, and whether al-kitab is referring to at-Tawrah or whether al-kitab to mean writing. Wal-hikmah. Al-hikmah is basically the wisdom. وَالتَّوْرَاةَ وَالْإِنْجِيلِ. التوراة is basically the revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had first started revelation onto Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and the Injil, the Gospels, the hikmah. Is it necessarily the wisdoms that were sent on al-Injil? So is the Injil necessarily something that was a revelation similar to the Quran, or were they inspirations, or were they teachings? Okay, so that's a different conversation. I don't want to go into that. وَإِذْ تَخْلُقُ مِنَ الطِّيرِ كَهَيْئَةِ الطَّيْرِ بِإِذْنِي. And وَإِذْ تَخْلُقُ, that he would create. So was he actually creating? So that's why, in order to emphasize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the actual creator, that's why that emphasis came in with my will or with my order. So what was he doing? Well, he was making out of clay something كَهَيْئَةِ الطَّيْرِ, something that would appear as a bird. Was it an actual bird? It was كَهَيْئَةِ الطَّيْرِ. And then فَتَنْفُخُ فِيهَا فَتَكُونُ طَيْرًا بِإِذْنِي. He would blow in it, and then it would become a bird by the order and by the will of the Lord Almighty. وَتُبْرِئُ الْأَكْمَهَ وَالْأَبْرَصَ. And you would heal the blind and those that are inflicted with leprosy with my order. And when you would تخرج الموتى بإذني, and you would resurrect the dead with my order. And وإذ كففت بني إسرائيل عنك, and I had كففت actually means to put a barrier between you and the children of Israel, away from you. عنك, in other words, to protect you. إذ جئتهم بالبينات. When, so this is different. So how many idhs did we have? Look at how many idhs that we have. إذ جئتهم بالبينات. When, so now this idh is different than the other ones. إذ جئتهم بالبينات. When you had come with the clear revelation. فقال الذين كفروا منهم. And then, now this is semicolon. Okay, فقال الذين كفروا منهم. And then those that had disbelieved from them, they had said, and right there, colon, إن هذا, quote, إن هذا, not inna, sorry, but in هذا إلا سحر مبين. What did they say? Well, quote, إن هذا, this is verily nothing but pure magic. Why did they call it magic? Why did they call it magic? Because they were capable of seeing something supernatural in it, but they didn't want to attribute to it anything good. So they wanted to attribute it to something evil. So they were capable of recognizing there's something new, supernatural. And that's why even the people of Quraysh, they attributed to the Prophet ﷺ that he was a magician. Why? Because they were recognizing that there was something supernatural, but they didn't want to admit that it contained anything good. So they wanted to claim that the supernatural piece of it is coming from an evil motive and an evil drive. Okay, and that's the same thing. It wasn't just Prophet Isa alayhi salam or Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but that was also always the case that different prophets and messengers would basically come with. And that's the same thing that you would see the different, of course, countries, the different media outlets, they will accuse people that are seeking justice. They will accuse that, well, they cannot have the power to use that power because they could do nothing but have evil motives and bring about injustice and corruption in the world, but they would consider that they have the right to use such power, to use such weapons, because they would give themselves the privilege and basically claim that because we are the white man, we know and we have the ability to basically use our power for good reasons. But that's not the case when it comes to brown man, when it comes to black man, when it comes to any other group, because they just don't have the ability, the intelligence, the motive to be good. Therefore, we have to make sure that they don't get any power because they are not going to use it but for evil reasons. Okay, so just it's subhanallah, that imperialist type of imperialist type of thinking. وإذ أوحيت إلى الحواريين, and look at how we did الحواريين. What are الحواريين? Disciples. And when I had the word أوحيت إلى الحواريين, when I had the word أوحيت, I'm going to get into some details in regards to أوحيت. What is أوحيت? When I had given, is it the inspiration or is it the revelation? So did the disciples actually have some form of what is the word? Some form of inspiration? How do we understand that? Did they have anything? What did they get? إلى الحواريين أن آمنوا. They were given basically some kind of an inspiration that they should believe in me, that is Prophet Isa alayhi salam, or is it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَبِرَسُولِي, and in my prophet. قالوا آمنا, they said we had believed, and واشهد بأننا مسلمون, and be a witness that we are Muslim. Okay, let's go to our Tafseer al-Qurtubi.
Are
Go
those
ahead.
Hawariyin same like the Sahaba to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
We're going to get to there, dear. We're going to get there. So let's say, so إذ قال الله يا عيسى ابن مريم اذكر نعمتي عليك. He said, well, that's basically when he said إذ قال, he said basically that this is a description as exactly like the ayah was basically saying right before it, and said يوم يجمع الله الرسل, and here إذ قال الله. So it's basically saying within the same concept, within the same time, within the same time context, that is. So this is basically telling us that, well, this is يوم يجمع الله الرسل, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gathered the prophets. In part of what will occur on that day is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would talk to Prophet Isa, and there's the conversation. This is very similar in the Quran. You would see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say, for example, "If," and what's going to happen in Jannah, what's going to happen in hellfire, what kind of conversations are going to be held, and so forth. So the Quran uses "if" in the context of letting you live that circumstance, letting you live the situation, letting you recognize whether this is the past that had happened, something in the past, or whether this is in the future, to let you be within that context. So just as he had said, اذكر يوم يجمع الله الرسل وإذ يقول الله لعيسى كذا وكذا, just exactly how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was saying, well, remember, and of course this is يوم يجمع الله الرسل, that is actually to say, and remember. But wait a minute, such things didn't even happen yet. So how is it that it's telling us يوم يجمع الله الرسل, and in this is talking about إذ قال. So is this going to be, is this the past or is this the future? How do we understand all of this? This is, it didn't happen yet, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that this will happen, and live the relationship, because this for sure will happen, even if you may not recognize it now, but it is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you is going to be part of your life, and therefore live the feeling, the sentiments, live the context of it. And certainly, when we're speaking about Ibn Maryam, of course, right there, إذ قال الله يا عيسى, or is it Ibn Maryam? So is this Ya Isa, and then calling him again to give him that honor? We talked about this yesterday, but of course, أذكر نعمتي. I want you to look at this one, because when you're talking about أذكر نعمتي عليك, why is he telling أذكر نعمتي عليك? And remember the blessings that I had blessed you with. But wait a minute, are we ordered to remember the blessings as well? Yes, والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما, here it is, بنعمة ربك فحدث. I want you to look at this one, because when you look at والضحى, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mentioned a number of different things that happened to the Prophet ﷺ in order to remind him of the good things that happened to him. And that actually comes with the whole concept when you look at the ayah, وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّث, and speak about the good things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed you with. But that's going to attract a lot of those hussad, a lot of those people that are going to be envying me. When we say, وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّث, فَحَدِّث, is it to tell others, or is it for you yourself to talk to yourself about it, for you to recognize? Now, this is important. Taking the moment to remember the good things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed you with is one way of showing, at-tahmid, is one way of showing that you are thankful for what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed you with. That you are thankful. This is one way to being thankful. Being thankful has one method, which is saying Alhamdulillah. Number two method is recognizing that it's there. Alhamdulillah that I have my health. Alhamdulillah that I have a roof above my head. Alhamdulillah that I have a car. Alhamdulillah that I have children. Alhamdulillah that I have that I'm married. Alhamdulillah that I have a job. Alhamdulillah that I have water and clean water to drink. Alhamdulillah, and the list goes on and on. Just recognizing that in itself has a huge effect on your spirituality, on your mind, and on your heart. And in fact, that's one way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was wanting us to become healthier spiritually, healthier psychologically, and healthier physically. Because the second that you recognize the good things that surround you, that's when you're capable of living ar-rida, living content, recognizing the good that you're in. But our brain usually recognizes the bad things that happened in our life. One day my mother spanked me. One day my father, he yelled at me and I was so scared, and etc. All these things, you would only remember the wrong things that happened. And well, there's one good phrasing and one hikmah that in order survival mode, that's part of our brain, that it remembers the wrong things, the dangers, pain, because that's for us to stay protected. It's a security defense. All right. It's just like animals. We would basically And remember, وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا طَائِرٍ يَطِيرُ بِجَنَاحَيْهِ إِلَّا أُمَمٌ أَمْثَالُكُم. So we're talking about every single animal that walks on earth or even a bird, etc. They would recognize pain, and by recognizing pain, we're recognizing the different ways to maintain our security. Okay, so of course, but it's going to be very dangerous if we would stay fixated on the pain, fixated on the harm, fixated on looking for what's missing, and not necessarily being thankful for what we have and recognizing the blessings that we have. And this
I
is
was just gonna say, sorry, I was just gonna
Go
say,
ahead.
do you remember the day you got married? Or the day you had a baby?
You asking me? Well, certainly I do remember the day I got married
Oh, okay, yeah.
and the day that
Because
I had a baby.
because I think that, you know, subhanAllah, we remember those really happy times as well, you know.
So we do remember those happy times, but then we tend to remember more of the painful things, Nora.
Yeah,
So
but
we,
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess that's true, but you know what I mean? Like, not all the memories are because we're not animals, right?
well, we are not animals, but we do have a lot of commonalities with animals, Nora. We function in very similar ways. That's why
Yeah, I
Allah
guess
subhanahu wa
so.
ta'ala is telling us the comparison. That's why, hey, before you take these medications, they try them on animals. Why? Because our bodies function in very similar ways. They're capable of recognizing depression on rats and mice. They're capable of recognizing obesity. They're capable of recognizing blood pressure. They would test on animals. And based on
Yeah,
testing on
I
animals,
guess so.
they would recognize the impact it may have on human beings. And the reason why they would choose animals with a lifespan that's a smaller lifespan is because it's easier for us to see the effect on a longer term and generations. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indicating that it's umamun amthalukum, that you have a lot of commonalities with animals, whether it's in the way that you would create social dynamics, or whether the way your body functions, or the way you are basically you're functioning in nature, etc. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was indicating that there are a lot of similarities between us and animals, even in the anatomy, believe it or not. So many
Yeah,
different,
except we're supposed to be the Khalifa
except
on
we're
the
supposed to
ard,
be the Khalifa.
right?
And another exception is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala,
And they didn't have the Salah,
well,
right?
they do actually have salah.
Or
But
the,
they
oh, you
do
mean the dhikr?
right. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala وَمَا مِن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُ. Everything basically does a certain tasbih, but you don't really recognize when and how that tasbih is done.
Yeah,
What is
that's
the
true.
mantis doing? Is the mantis making, I don't know, a dua right there? I don't know what the mantis is doing.
Yeah.
Same
But
that
they didn't take on the responsibility that we did.
Right. So that's another thing, is that that khilafah, that's another thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically إِنَّا عَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ, and we're talking about the السماوات والأرض الجبال فأبين أن يحملنها وحمل الإنسان إنه كان ظلوما جهولا. So الإنسان was the only one that took التكليف, that took the responsibility of al-khilafah, that took the responsibility of the free will, and is held accountable. But animals don't have free will. All the other creations don't have free will. But if you were to talk about, for example, the animals themselves, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَحَمَلْنَاهُم فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وَرَزَقْنَاهُم مِّنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and verily we had given the honor to the children of Adam. وحملناهم في البر والبحر. And they were carried, they were given basically a certain potential to walk on land, to walk on earth. وحملناهم في البر والبحر ورزقناهم من الطيبات, and had
To
given them.
remember the good times?
Well, certainly, Noura, we remember the good times. I'm not saying we don't remember the good times, but
Okay,
you know,
I'm just
even
kidding. Jazakallah khair.
that's okay. Even in neuroscience, they will tell you that that we are basically capable of remembering more the pain that we go through than the good things that we may encounter. And that's basically the survival mode, and that's to keep us basically in a way to keep us secure. So we would remember pain, but it's really dangerous if we get fixated on pain and not recognize the good things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was letting us know, don't get fixated on pain, but definitely learn from pain in order to, one, عجبا لأمر المؤمن. A believer is different. They recognize the pain, but they don't stay fixated on it. They learn from that pain, but they don't necessarily stay fixated on it and thinking that that's basically meaning that I'm doomed. We would learn, we would go on, and that's why they would إذا أصابته ضراء صبر. إذا أصابته ضراء صبر. Whenever harm pricks them, they would basically live in patience / endurance. They would not stay fixated on that, but they would actually move on to recognize that there's always hope, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that had all al-adl, that He was the one that had all al-adl, all justice, and He is the one to control the world. So when we look at that piece of it, اذكر نعمتي عليك, remember the blessings that I had blessed you with. And we compared it with the ayah in Surah al-Duha, the ayat in Surah al-Duha. And we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was reminding the Prophet ﷺ, same thing. If you were to look at Prophet Musa alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Prophet Musa alayhi salam, remember when I had done this, and then Surah Al-Shu'ara, remember when this had happened to you, remember, etc. That reminder is to actually have a lot of implications in the person's ability to recognize that victory is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's number one. That whatever blessings that you, especially when you were most vulnerable. Why when you were most vulnerable? I want you to look at this one. What did He actually start with? He started when you were most vulnerable, when it was a blessing upon you and your mother, when, of course, hey, you were most vulnerable when your mother was pregnant with you, you spoke in infancy. Let's go to Surah Al-Duha. Let's just remember 135 right there. Okay, let's go to Surah Al-Duha. Does it actually use the same concept and talking about that moment when a person was most vulnerable or not? Is it the same? Is it the same way? We'll see in Surah Al-Duha. Let's look at Surah Al-Duha. ما ودعك ربك وما قلى, and your Lord Almighty had not left you, and for the hereafter is better for you than this first, that is this dunya. And your Lord Almighty would bless you to the point that you would be content. Now speaking about the most vulnerable times. أَلَمْ يَجِدْكَ يَتِيمًا فَآوَى, did He not find you as an orphan but given you shelter? وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى, when you were ضَالًّا, when you basically had no support and He had given you guidance, and when you basically were poor, but the Lord Almighty had given you the provision. And therefore, for the orphan, do not harm them. لا تقهر, it's like don't, what is the word? القهر. القهر is basically to make a person feel hopeless. وَأَمَّا السَّائِلَ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ, and for the person, beggars, or the people coming to ask for help, even if you can't support them, فَلَا تَنْهَرْ, do not disrespect them. وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ, and for the blessings of your Lord Almighty, remember, فحدث, whether it's speak about it or remember it. I want to look at this one. Compare that with those ayat. ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى. Not find you as an orphan, etc. Now we're looking at the most vulnerable times when a person is an orphan. And basically, what are the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with? If we were to go to Surah Al-Shu'ara, it was actually doing the exact same thing and telling him, or Surah Taha, was it Surah Al-Shu'ara or Surah Taha? Hopefully I can find it really quick. It was actually doing the same exact thing, the same idea, and basically reminding Prophet Musa alayhi salam that this is what I had done, that this is what I had given you, and when you were most vulnerable and you were in danger and so forth, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was basically reminding him of the same thing. I hope I can find that really quick for you to actually see the pattern, but sometimes it's kind of hard to find it in the book, because sometimes you have to think backwards in the pages because they're going backwards and not forward, so it becomes hard for you to spot the ayah in that book like that. Okay, so just recognizing those most vulnerable times, we would usually think of those moments as basically it was just unfolding, and it was just a natural potential, some energy right there, and that it was actually unfolding right there without you recognizing that it was actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's see right there. Look at this right there. I guess, alhamdulillah, we found it. Okay. قال قد أوتيت سؤلك يا موسى وَلَقَدْ مَنَنَّا عَلَيْكَ مَرَّةً أُخْرَى. Let's see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us right there that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed him another time. And here again, he reminds him of the same moment when he was most vulnerable and probably didn't recognize that it was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's powers that were making things unfold. إِذْ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّكَ مَا يُوحَىٰ. When he had basically, we had inspired your mother, and certainly an inspiration from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here, reminding him when he was most vulnerable and how he had given his mother a certain inspiration to throw him in a tabut, so kind of like a bassinet or something, and throw him in the sea and let the sea basically take him to the shore. And who's going to take him? Well, it was going to be an enemy for him and an enemy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wait a minute. So why throw him into something that is making him even more vulnerable? That doesn't even make sense. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting you know what you would consider as what makes the most sense. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has his ways in making things unfold unexpectedly. وَأَلْقَيْتُ عَلَيْكَ مَحَبَّةً مِّنِّي. This enemy ironically starts having this deep love to who? Well, to the person that was going to be his enemy one day. وَلِتُصْنَعَ عَلَىٰ عَيْنِي. And لِتُصْنَعَ عَلَىٰ عَيْنِي. It's like you were being made, you were being disciplined, you were actually getting into some kind of a making under the supervision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when, of course, and that's why make the dua always to give hidayah to your children. You could put them in Islamic schools. You can give them all those lectures. You can talk to them. You can take away the iPhones, the iPads. You can do all your homework. This is your homework, to actually make sure that your kids are basically safe from all of those things. But you don't guarantee hidayah. We don't guarantee hidayah. I can try to give them hidayah. I can do my homework to protect them from all the fitan, but وَلِتُصْنَعَ عَلَىٰ عَيْنِي. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gives hidayah. إذ تمشي أختك فتقول هل أدلكم على من يكفله. When your sister had come and she said, should I show you off to a person who could take care of him, basically be the nanny, and we brought you back to your mother in order for her تقر عينها ولا تحزن, for her to be content and her eyes to be content and not feel sorrow. And when you had created, when you had killed a soul, and then we had saved you from all the sorrow, and you were going into all those different trials, from one trial, a hardship after another, and you had stayed with the family of Madian for a couple years, and then you were to come to an appointed time. Okay, what did we, واصطنعتك لنفسي, again, we had basically, all of this was in order for you to be on a mission. Now that you're on a mission, اذهب أنت وأخوك بآياتي ولا تنيا في ذكري. Then the mission is you and your brother, you're going to go with my verses and not hold back in mentioning and being on that mission. Go to the Pharaoh, for he had transgressed the limit. I want you to look at this one, because every single ayah, just like when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was basically telling, telling Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, or the Muhammad sallam, or Isa alayhi salam, it was always coming in and bringing about the same pattern. When you recognize your most vulnerable moments, see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be the one to let some hidden potential get you out of the situation that you're in without you knowing how, without you recognizing. But here's one dangerous thing, is you thinking that it was your intelligence that got you out of this. If you got married to the right person, well, it's not because you were so smart to just recognize this is the right person. It's that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you the inspiration that this is the right person. If you recognize you got a job, it wasn't because, or your business worked out. It doesn't mean that you're just so smart that you got your business to work out. No, it's a rizq min Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The rizq is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You recognize that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving you the inspiration, just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given the wahi for Musa. Now we recognize, اذكر نعمتي عليك وعلى والدتك إذ أيدتك بروح القدس. Now remember all the different blessings, and therefore this is it to talk to Prophet Isa alayhi salam, or is this to talk to the people to remember? So it's kind of like if I'm talking to a person, but I'm not speaking to that person, I'm actually letting the viewers or the audience recognize, but I would demonstrate it like I'm talking to that person. Okay, so this is one opinion, that it's talking to Prophet Isa alayhi salam, but it's not necessarily, the discourse is not directed at Prophet Isa as much as it's directed at the people to recognize that he was vulnerable. If he were God, if Prophet Isa alayhi salam was God himself or the Son of God, he would have not needed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's powers to basically give him security, to give him the power, to all of that. And therefore, this is to let those that are believing in Prophet Isa alayhi salam as the Son of God know, how is it that he is God or the Son of God? And how does that even make sense when he was at a certain point vulnerable, and he was actually a baby in his mother's womb? Then that makes no sense that he would be God, because a God, just like in Surah, was it Al-An'am? A God, or was it Surah Al-Imran? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say, well, they were just كَانَ يَأْكُلَانِ الطَّعَامِ, they were just eating food and drinking. In other words, they were dependent on others. They were dependent on Allah for their livelihood. In other words, he's not the one that provides, and he is not the razaq. therefore he can't be God. Same thing. He cannot be God if he was actually created, and if he was a creature in his mother's womb, then he's not the creator. He is a creature. For the Lord Almighty, he is the creator. The Lord Almighty is the provider. The Lord Almighty is the cherisher. The Lord Almighty could never be vulnerable because the Lord Almighty is basically Al-Aziz. He's self-efficient. He's not dependent on anyone. He is beyond all. So is this necessarily talking to Prophet Isa alayhi salam, or is this brought as if it was a conversation to Prophet Isa alayhi salam to let the audience, that is the people of the book, recognize that, hey, he cannot be God or the Son of God because he lived in stages of being vulnerable, dependent. He was created, he was given provisions, he was basically dependent on the Creator himself for all of this. إِذْ أَيَّدْتُكَ بِرُوحِ الْقُدُسِ. And certainly when I had given you the power, the support, بِرُوحِ الْقُدُسِ. Ruh al-Qudus is another thing, is another name. Ruh al-Qudus, Jibril alayhi salam. Ruh al-Qudus is basically what the Christians would call a ghost, basically Jibril alayhi salam. تُكَلِّمُ النَّاسَ فِي الْمَهْدِ وَكَهْلًا. And this basically enabled you to speak in infancy and even at late age. Let's look at right there. So اذكر نعمتي, number one, it was to do what? So to mention the blessings, to do what? In order to let the people know all the different things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with. Two, to basically confirm the miracles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with, in order for those that would deny his prophethood to recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given to him with what? Bi-idhni. It was by the order of the Lord Almighty. إِذْ أَيَّدْتُكَ means giving you support. And certainly when we're talking about Ruh al-Qudus, الروح الطاهرة التي خصه الله بها. Is it Ruh al-Qudus? Is it the Ruh al-Tahir? Is it basically that his spirit itself, basically what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him, and inside of him, basically the spirit, since he was not born from a father, but was born from a mother, is that the Ruh al-Qudus, basically what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blown in him, or is this Jibril alayhi salam? So that's the two opinions. The first opinion said it was the spirit that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blown in him. The second opinion said it was Jibril alayhi salam. And al-Qurtubi comments, and he said, and that is most accurate. It was Jibril alayhi salam, and not necessarily the soul or the spirit that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blown in him. He said, وَهُوَ الْأَصَحِ, that it was Jibril alayhi salam, which is, what is Ruh al-Qudus? What is? Well, the question is, what is Ruh? So the word Ruh can
This is
mean,
very interesting.
yeah, really interesting. So when you're looking at Ruh,
Be the
what
Ruh
is,
that Allah sent an angel to our mom at the 4 months when we are inside her body, and it blew forth the Ruh.
right, so it's hadith Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. إن أحدكم يجمع خلقه في بطن أمه 40 يوما نطفة. And then of course we know the rest of the hadith. Okay, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically sends الملائكة فيقول أي رب ذكر أم أنثى, and then he tells him what to do, and then شقي أم سعيد, and then he tells him what to do, and then and at the end basically all of that, and tells him also to write the rizq, etc. Right, so Hadith Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is basically telling us that certainly there is some ruh that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would basically blow in it. Is it that ruh? That's, so I have this ruh, but certainly it's not a Ruh al-Qudus. Okay, I've got
Not that, because
you've
it's
got
from
that
Allah.
ruh, right? But is this Ruh al-Qudus basically to mean that it was a blessed one? Oh, that's one thing. Is it to mean that it was a blessed ruh? It was a different kind of a ruh? Well, you compared it to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ when he said that every single person has a qareen. And then what is that qareen? So a qareen is supposed to be a creature that is with you. So wait, there's a qareen with me right now? Yes, there's a qareen with you. What is that qareen doing? Well, that qareen is basically whispering. It's like a jinn. And then the Sahaba asked, well, do you have one? Asked the Prophet ﷺ. And he said in two different narrations, إِلَّا أَنَّ رَبِّي أَعَانَنِي عَلَيْهِ فَأُسْلِمْ. Or is it فَأَسْلَمْ? Is it فَأَسْلَمْ that he had become Muslim? Or is it فَأُسْلِمْ, in other words, for me to stay safe from him? Is that what was taken when Hadith al-Shaqq al-Sadr happened, when the Prophet ﷺ, when the Malaika had come and opened up the chest of the Prophet ﷺ and took something out and said, well, هذا حظ الشيطان منك. This is what shaitan uses against you. In other words, to control you. Took something black out. Well, what is that? Can we do some kind of a cardiovascular surgery and get this thing out? No, it's not something that you could necessarily find somewhere where, okay, let's make all the people be good and make every single person, even from early childhood, make them a surgery and basically get this black piece out. You're not going to find anything. That's a completely different thing. It's just ghaib. Okay,
Is it not
so
shaitan work on the fitrah?
So certainly but this is not necessarily coming in with the fitrah. This is actually indicating that it's something else that is inside of us. You look at, for example, in nafs, you look at the ruh, you look at al-qalb, you look at it, but this was something in al-qalb. How was it? What was really controlling us? I guess we're a lot more sophisticated than we actually think.
Did the same ruh said Allah to call her while passing away, Ya ayyatuha an-nafsul mutma'inna rji'i. As he blew it, he asked it to
Right. So, this is all alam al-ghaib. You'll have different opinions between scholars what really makes a ruh. قال وما أوتيتم ويسألونك عن الروح قل الروح من أمر ربي وما أوتيتم من العلم إلا قليلا. They ask you about the ruh. As much as you try and as much as you try to use those different texts in order to understand the ruh. قال وما أوتيتم من العلم إلا قليلا. What really is a ruh? And even when you talk about a nafs, is it a nafs al-lawama, nafs al-mutma'inna, nafs al-ammara bis-su'? Is this the same thing as a ruh? That's where you would say all those differences of opinions between scholars, but at the end, to not go far, الروح, what really is it? وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. We don't have but very limited information about الروح. Does it have a smell? It has a smell. What is the smell of a ruh? Well, you don't recognize it, but the malaika do. Yes, there's a ruh for men.
Salt, voice.
What was it? What was that?
Ruh has voice.
Ruh, does it have a voice? Allahu A'lam.
I hear the scholar said that it has a voice, but if Allah let us hear its breathing and its thought, we can't sleep day and night. It stay like the same.
I don't know where that's coming from, to be honest. So I'll have to research that one. But when we speak about ruh, does it have a jism? Yes, it does. The evidence is that meaning a body. Yes, it does. The evidence is that when a person dies, إن الروح إذا خرجت تبعها البصر. That when the ruh leaves the body, it evacuates the body, leaves the body, the eyes would basically follow it. They would see it. So yes, there's something physical about it. Well, what is it? Is there a weight for it? What do we actually, is there a smell for it? Yes, because the malaika would smell it and they would recognize it. Does it have a sound? Allahu A'lam. What does this look like? At the end, At the end, of course, when we're speaking about Ruh al-Qudus, this is speaking about something that is part of al-Ghaib. Is it Jibreel alayhi salam? Is it that he had a pure soul that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed him with? At the end, this is basically just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had told him, وَرُوحٌ مِّنْهُ, and a special spirit from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which was mentioned in Surah An-Nisa in regards to Prophet Isa alayhi salam. So what was he doing? تُكَلِّمُ النَّاسَ فِي الْمَهْدِ وَكَهْلًا. So what does it mean to kallim? To kallim actually means to talk to people. So nas is people. To kallim means, communicating, conversing, and in infancy as well, to basically talk to the people in al-Mahd. Al-Mahd itself, like I said, is usually the place where a baby is placed in. So whether we're speaking about like a crib, or we're talking about a bassinet, or speaking about just a small area where the baby is basically placed in, and Sabiya as an infant, and as an older person, Nabiya as a prophet. So was he a prophet from infancy, or did he become a prophet later? Okay, so we actually talked about that before in Surah Al-Imran. And let's continue. And what does it say? وإذ أيتك بروح تكلم وإذ علمتك الكتاب والحكمة والتوراة والإنجيل. Let's say it's weird that he didn't actually mention that one, but we're going to mention it. Okay, so right there, علمتك الكتاب والحكمة. So what is al-kitab? Usually in the Quran, when it talks about al-kitab wal-hikmah, in the context of speaking to Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, al-kitab would be al-Quran and al-hikmah would be sunnah. But with Prophet Isa alayhi salam, علمتك الكتاب والحكمة, is al-kitab al-Tawrah and al-hikmah, is it al-Injil? Or is al-kitab, you see that? I want you, let's look at it right there. Is al-kitab referring to Torah and al-hikmah referring to al-Injil? Or is this al-kitab and al-hikmah and al-Torah and al-Injil 4 different items? Differences of opinions between scholars. Okay.
Ya Allah, I never thought about that angle.
No, this is
I was thinking maybe because you brought this up, yani, maybe it could be the wahi itself, yani.
Right. I mean, you look at it, is it al-kitab is a different thing, al-hikmah is a different thing, al-Tawrah is a different thing, al-Injil is a different thing, or is this al-kitab to mean al-Tawrah and al-hikmah to mean Injil? If we are to say al-kitab is a different thing, we're talking about the ability to write, the ability to read, write, etc. So in other words, the ability to get sciences. Okay, so that's one thing, that he was given education. Okay, al-hikmah would be, well, there's a difference between getting the education in theory and knowing where to basically put this education. It's like speaking about, yes, a person can know things in theory, but when it comes to practice, they just don't know how to put that on ground. That's a different potential.
I wish we could go into more detail just about this, what the scholars said.
Right. I mean, inshallah, we could probably use another book, inshallah. But when you're looking at al-hikmah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even mentions in وَمَا يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. Whoever was granted al-hikmah, then they would.
In Islam, it's al-hadith.
Because it says al-kitab wal-hikmah wa-Torah. Yeah, so.
And al-kitab.
Yeah, we need to go into detail on this. Khalas.
Let's go into details, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair.
In general, al-hikmah is وضع الشيء في موضعه. It's basically putting the different matters in where they belong. So in theory, you can say, well, this is the ruling, and yeah, that's the end of it. But sometimes understanding the circumstances and basically knowing how to apply all of this, that is the theory and where it belongs, is al-hikmah. It's understanding and going beyond by looking at farther than the situation you're living in. You're planning ahead by 20 years, by 10 years, by 15 years, etc. Planning ahead. So you're making the different
because
planning.
look at the order. Look at the order. It's al-kitab wal-hikmah wal-torah wal-injil. Yani it's not the it's the order it's in. We have to research this ayah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
can we
let's see.
understand it like al-kitab in Islam, al-Quran. That means al-Injil. Al-Hikmah may be normal talk of Jesus, peace be upon him, saying that
Because the Torah was revealed before the Injil.
yeah, for that, Torah
So that's why I'm just analyzing it. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
and
everybody.
they
You
make
know-
it Torah wal Injil, one book. This is the book he mentioned. It may be Torah wal
Right.
Injil, take it Old Testament, New Testament in same book, right? This is the
So
Kitab.
Torah would be the Old Testament. Well, not entirely, because
Oh, so you're saying the Quran itself would be al-hikmah?
Al-Kitab for Muslims.
No, because this is
Quran.
no,
Wal
no, no.
Hikmah, Hadith, Sunnah.
Because
We need to go into
no.
detail. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
الكتاب والحكمة, in the context of the ayat that relate to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that would be al-Quran and al-Sunnah. But here, this is relating to Isa alayhi salam. This is not talking about Kitab wal-Hikmah, Quran and Sunnah.
Yeah. So
Okay? This is this talking about
But
al-Kitab?
even though, Yani, even though he knew that the Prophet ﷺ was going to be coming.
Even though he doesn't know that far in the future, he just knows that
Okay.
there's going to be a
Jazakallah
prophet
khair.
coming, but he doesn't know all the details of it. Okay, so when we're speaking about al-kitaba wal-hikmah, so we're speaking about perhaps an education and the application and the Torah. Now here's one thing. Is it Torah al-kitab itself, and is al-Injil al-hikmah? What does that mean? So if we're talking about we're talking about the Gospels of Isa alayhi salam, was it a revelation just like what the Quran was revealed into? In other words, ayah by ayah, verse by verse, or was it that Isa alayhi salam was given teachings, was given wisdom, was given inspirations, but it wasn't a revelation like al-Quran? You would see a lot of times people that would debate Christians, and they would say, where's the gospel of Jesus? Where's the gospel of Jesus? Expecting that it's something similar to what that we have in the Quran, the Quran being the word by word, letter by letter, and the Quran was sent like that, and thinking that Isa alayhi salam was actually sent something where it's a word by word, letter by letter, etc. But there is an indication that Injil itself wasn't necessarily something that it was a word by word, letter by letter, but it was a general inspiration that was given to Prophet Isa alayhi salam, which is al-hikmah, a certain inspiration, certain teachings that Prophet Isa alayhi salam was basically teaching Bani Israel, or teaching the people, and whether they had taken it or not. So I actually have to drop my husband off for Salatul Jumu'ah. We're going to
Do you
stop
promise
right
that we're going to go into detail on this ayah? Because
Inshallah.
it's going to
Tikram
bother me
Ainik.
like going to sleep.
Oh dear. Tikram Ainik. That'll be,
Sorry.
Khair inshallah. But I have to actually go to drop him off into Salatul Jumu'ah. I promised. So yeah, inshallah, we'll continue that.
Taqabballah, inshallah.
Ameen ya Rabbi.
Any
Assalamu
question
alaikum.
you have to more about this ayat? MashaAllah.
Yeah, inshallah.
Inshallah, jazakallah khair. Yalla,
Wa
assalamu
iyyakum.
alaikum.
Wa